first thing that struck me, and Mr. Mehrotra, I think when you can see me, that he is the Calcutta connection, that he is, passed out from Lamarck's Calcutta. Then he went to St. Stephen's College, Delhi. And then, of course, universities of Oxford and Columbia. He has written 9 books, and they have got more than 50 editions. Many of these books have been on Dalai Lama. And then, of course, the later part, he has directed or produced more than 650 documentary films. Now, from books to documentary films, fantastic. And which were shown in more than 1,800 festivals, and more than 300 awards for these documentary films, and including 49 national awards. He has twice addressed the plenary session at the World Economic Forum, twice addressed that. That's a fantastic achievement, I think. And of course, at the end, the lady who deserves credit for having Mr. Rajiv Mehrotra amongst us, the chairperson program, Renuka Shah. She has, I can see her, looking very serious. Renuka ji, you did not look so serious. So, she as she has done all over the year, she contacted him and ensured that Mr. Mehrotra is amongst us. Mr. Mehrotra, a very, very hearty welcome to you on behalf of Rotary Club of Calcutta. We are in our 101st year of existence. And as I never get tired in saying that we are a club which has had the privilege of listening to Mahatma Gandhi speak in 1925, the father of the nation. And we have also had the pleasure and the privilege and the honor of listening to Dalai Lama speak, in one of our club meetings. So with these words, may I now request you to kindly address us. Usually, the time limit is 25 minutes. So we would, you can speak for 25 minutes, and then there could be a lot of questions from the audience. We shall, take those questions. So Mr. Mehrotra, the floor is all yours.
Gosh, thank you, Mr. Mitra. I'm sort of quite overwhelmed and awed to be in this very distinguished line of speakers that you have hosted, in this very distinguished community that I feel deeply privileged to address. I mean, I hasten to add that, we are really not measured by the public recognition or the achievements or material wealth, but who we are as human beings. And as a human being, I have to confess that I am really just a struggling aspirant, and I owe being here to my teacher and guru, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And, His Holiness often jokes that if you think you are too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. And I think I'm just that little mosquito. Of course, His Holiness is no mosquito. He describes himself as a simple Buddhist monk. He's the preeminent statesman with his message of compassion, altruism, and peace on his ever-smiling, radiating, infectious happiness and joy. And so it is a deep privilege to be a student of his. Where can I begin to talk about what we learn from a great master? He's considered the embodiment of the reincarnation of Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha aspect of compassion. He reincarnated as the 14th Dalai Lama, the temporal and spiritual leader of Tibet. He's been exiled in India as an honored guest since 1959, following the Chinese invasion and genocide in Tibet. His Holiness does not propose to us that his way is the best. And I think that this is a very unique perspective and vision and humility that he brings to his teaching. And he suggests that the decision is really up to us. And if there is something about his teaching which may be suitable for us, then we need to experiment with it and adopt it if it adds value to our lives. And if it is not of use, then we should discard it. And I think that this, at a time in a world where there is so much the conviction that somehow our way, or the highway, is an extremely important, critical baseline on which to present who he is and what he teaches and his aspiration. And our aspiration is not to be better than anyone else, but to be happier and more fulfilled than we used to be. And we are all different, and yet we are all the same. And His Holiness tells us that the purpose of life is to be happy. And well-being and happiness comes not through prayer, but through training the mind and through sadhana, practice. And so here we have, one of the many learnings from His Holiness is that here we have the preeminent Buddhist monk. He's 85 years old. And in recent months, of course, he's been in retreat and in quarantine because of COVID. But till recently, in recent years, he was practicing 5, 6, 7 hours a day and engaging in a rigorous sadhana. And so here's a man who people consider Avalokiteshvara, embodiment of compassion, a living Buddha. People worship him. They visualize him as a deity. And what does he do? He continues to practice, and thereby demonstrating that we cannot really make a difference in our lives without practice. We have never really arrived, no matter what our age may be, and at what stage in our lives we should be. And so every human being wants happiness and to avoid suffering. And if we can recognize that this is what unites us, then our fractured planet would begin to see peace and tranquility and greater concern for each other. And so whether one is rich or poor, educated or illiterate, each one of us share basic needs for food, shelter, safety, and love. And the minute we can really truly experience and see that, the otherness of the other, diminishes. And so in his, we often sort of, remark that, ignorance is bliss. But where ignorance is our master, there is no possibility of real peace. And I think what His Holiness and the tradition that he embodies is really saying that independent of what our particular faith might be, we need to engage and try and understand the true nature of reality. And the true nature of reality from our particular position in the planet, in history, and where we are located. And, the Buddha himself, had said that, addressed his followers and said, look, my teachings are not final or absolute. They are pointers delivered at a particular time in history and with a particular vocabulary, and presented to my community, the Buddhist community at that time, in the vocabulary of that time. And that they must always be subjected to reason, to logic, and to experience. And so it is this basic underpinning that His Holiness's word is not final, and he is in fact very he constantly advises people who suggest that, look, maybe Buddhism is my faith and I want to become a Buddhist, contrary to sort of the dominant discourse. His Holiness is always at pains to say, I think you should retain your particular faith, your particular tradition, and learn from all knowledge, including the knowledge of our times, the discoveries and understanding of modern science. And I think the cornerstone of this is that while we look to understanding the external nature of reality and the reality of the human experience, which to His Holiness really is that, from the moment we are born, we start moving rapidly towards our death, and that we will engage, we will experience the suffering of the human condition, and there is no escape from that, for anyone. But what we can do by training the mind and understanding the mind is to not suffer the pain of the human condition. And the pillars of that really are, the appreciation that things are impermanent, things change, and that we live in an interdependent world. And if we can truly understand and internalize these three principles, and in particular to embrace impermanence. People think that or believe and experience misery from the fact that things are always unchanging. However, impermanence is not the case. It's not the cause of misery itself, because suffering comes from expecting things to continue as they are, and our ignorance of that felt reality. And so he often argues that it is not enough for us to intellectually understand this, but we must experientially recognize this so that it impacts our deepest reflexive responses. And pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. We have bigger houses, but smaller families, more conveniences, but less time. We have knowledge, but poorer judgment, more experts with more problems, more medicines, but less health. And so the aspect of sadhana becomes crucial. And it is not just training the mind, because we tend to equate the mind with the intellect, but the training of our emotions. And so we have the idea in Tibetan Buddhism of kleshas, which we call afflictive emotions. And these are, this really constitutes, the elements of this are, attachment, to feel emotional, turbulence, and to desire is not something that is negative. I mean, sort of many traditions will tell us that, we have to eliminate all desire. But His Holiness would argue the desire to ease other people's suffering, there can be no greater desire than that. And so His Holiness is the embodiment of compassion. And so he says that the most valuable quality that we can develop in order to reduce our sense of suffering is the cultivation and nurturing of compassion. And why compassion? Because, in his engagement with modern science, and to look at the vocabulary of modern science with which to communicate and persuade us intellectually as well as emotionally, you may be familiar with Dan Goleman's book called Emotional Intelligence, and some of these sort of major scientists, including John Kabat-Zinn and Richie Davidson at Wisconsin University. I mean, a group of these three scientists, started about 20 years ago to engage in psychological research and brain mapping to look at what insights we could get from the modern sciences on the value of compassion. And psychological testing established that people who tended to suffer and experience mental distress, when they were analyzed or interviewed, that there was an obsession with I, me, mine. So there was a very strong sense of self. And it led to the understanding that the more we can soften the sense of self and begin to think of other people, the less our problems seem severe and intractable. And they also found that, and this was through brain mapping, and the idea of neuroplasticity of the brain, that after X number of hours, I mean, I think they started with 20 and went up to people who had meditated for 1,000 hours, that there were actually enduring changes in the brain while people sustained a conscious practice of nurturing compassion. And as a result, it offered a concrete, practical correlative that reassured people that nurturing compassion actually impacts the part of the brain that houses emotions and changes our relationship to suffering. And so His Holiness will always often say that love and true compassion are his religions. And to develop those, we do not need to believe in any religion. And because the essence of any religion is a good heart. And so he calls love and compassion a universal religion. And that the different religious traditions, with their own particular techniques and approaches, strengthen these basic human qualities. And again, I just want to point out that at a time of so much fracture on our planet, this is what enables His Holiness to go to a mosque and perform the namaz, or to go to a church and sing a Christian hymn, and in sending out the signal that no matter what particular religion you practice, if the aspiration is the nurturing of compassion, that not only does that heal divides, and an underlying element there, of course, is that different mental dispositions need different mental diets. Just like each of us needs a different diet of food, depending on our the climate that we live in, different dietary preferences, that we similarly need different religions and different traditions. And he emphasizes that just literary knowledge or intellectual knowledge is not enough. I mean, you can read all the books you want, you can listen to more eloquent speakers than I can ever be, and learn from them. But if you don't analyze and practice what you learn, your knowledge is superficial. He often talks about his experience with a monk who had been in several years in retreat, and he went out for a walk and saw a man meditating on the side of the road. When he asked the man what he was meditating on, he said compassion and tolerance. Then the quick-witted monk replied that to the man who walked by and just sort of spit at him, and he said, "Eat shit." And it tells us that when provoked, that all those years of solitary, meditation just went out of the window, and or practice, because it was all in the realm of knowledge and hadn't truly impacted and had a transformational experience. And so the practice of compassion, the learning the embodiment of compassion, and when I first went up to Dharamsala in the 1980s, I was amazed and moved to see that the Tibetan monks used to pray on mats which said, "Pray for the Chinese." And these were people who had dislodged them from their country and engaged in genocide. And so His Holiness would say, as common to many other traditions and faiths, that, enemies provide us with excellent opportunities to practice patience, perseverance, and compassion, and that we should not hate those who do wrong or harmful things, but very importantly, that we shouldn't just turn away. But with compassion, we must do what we can to stop them, for actually they're harming themselves, as well as those who suffer from their actions. So it's not just a hands-off approach from people who may be, hostile to us, and but to try and restrain them from, getting worse. And so often he would say that, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. And it is not a luxury. It is essential for our own peace and mental stability. It is essential, for human happiness. And so that remains the key aspect of His Holiness's striving in action and his philosophy, and a man of deep renunciation. He inherited. He was born into being the 14th Dalai Lama. He was identified when he was 4 years old, and he has been living in India as the guest of the government and the people of India for more than 60 years. It embodies an amazing success story of a refugee community, that many years in exile, who have retained their identity and remained welcome by their hosts. And this has to do both, of course, with the host country, India, and the Tibetans themselves. And His Holiness will often say that, India is our guru. But students of his, like myself, respond and say, well, India was the guru of the Tibetans, and the Tibetans are today our gurus, and they have brought back to India the rich legacy of the Nalanda tradition, of which His Holiness is the preeminent heir. And what did what were the key elements of the Nalanda tradition that add so much value to our own lives, to our own philosophy, and to India's rich civilizational heritage? And that was that they offered the most sophisticated mind training techniques and emotional training techniques, where we could train our minds and train our emotions. So we have now developed, our systems of education that are much too obsessed with preparing people for livelihoods, preparing people with skills development. And those of you who track, as I do, I'm a great admirer of Yuval Harari, the Israeli intellectual, and he has argued that. Somebody asked him, a parent asked him that, look, what should I ask my young child to study? And he said, the most useful thing you can study is philosophy. Because as modern society unfolds, in the spirit of the Dalai Lama, and by the way, Harari does a 2-month retreat in Buddhist meditation every year. And he said is that we can be equipped to embrace change. Because any individual who is now coming out of school or college or entering the professions will probably have to retrain himself several times in his lifetime, and to retrain himself professionally and to equip himself emotionally to be able to work and cope with change. And the specific techniques to that arrive from the Nalanda tradition. Now, what are those techniques? And it really has to do with the first premise, which, as His Holiness had mentioned, that we need to embrace change, we need to train our minds, and we need to subject our understanding and our experience to reason and logic. So how did the great masters of the Nalanda tradition equipped themselves, and many Buddhist treatises they wrote. And it was because the Nalanda tradition housed people from different intellectual traditions, different spiritual traditions from around the world. So any hypothesis that was developed was not tested and argued before the converted or people who were already on the same page as us, but people who represented diversity. And so that structure of logic and practice was subject to the most rigorous intellectual rigor. And so we claim, or we like to believe, that we live in these sort of times of science and technology, but we don't embrace the logic of science. And as the great Jawaharlal Nehru, not in fashion these days, said that India needed a scientific temper. And I think that's what he really meant, that while we embrace our emotions and we recognize the limits of science, we need to subject what we believe in and practice to the rigor of those processes. And that really is His Holiness's great contribution, that here is a man of the spirit who meditates, who worships, who prays, and circumscribes that with intellectual rigor, subject to, for want of a better word, it's a dirty word these days, circumscribed by a secular ethic that is independent of any particular religion or tradition, without in any way undermining individual faith, and being able to accept that each of these has a role and a contribution to make. And I can only end by another quote from His Holiness, and it says that knowledge never decreases by being shared. Share your knowledge. It's the way to achieve immortality. If you contribute to other people's happiness, you will find true happiness. And so, thank you very much for this privilege of, sharing a few thoughts about, a man on whom you can, write and speak volumes. And he also says that, sometimes you can create a better impression, not just by using words, but also just by knowing when it is wise to be silent. And I think it's time for me to be silent. So thank you very much for listening to me so patiently, and trying to arrive at a summary of a man whose learning and wisdom embraces virtually eternity, and a huge canvas of wisdom. So thank you very much, and for listening to me so patiently.
Mr. Mehrotra, you have really, I can see a lot of, the audience clapping on the screen. You have really touched our minds and hearts with your address. And your address has been so enlightening. You started off by saying that pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Such deep thoughts. And then you go on to say that contribute to other people's happiness, you'll find true happiness. So these words, and then of course, I have been writing down, by the way, whatever you have been saying, I've been noting down. Enemies provide us with excellent opportunities to practice perseverance and compassion. So excellent words, excellent sentences, I think have deep meaning. And for all of us, it has been a really a revelation, enlightening experience. But we have amongst us, many Rotarians who had already posted questions to the chat box, which I'll be asking you. But before that, may I recognize the presence here of PDG Tony Sharma, who was a speaker last week, NK Gopinath from our Rotary Club of Madras, PDG Anshuman Bandyopadhyay from our own district. And I cannot name them, but I can see a huge international audience amongst us. See, I'm sure they have all come to listen to you, Mr. Mehrotra.
Good God.
My first question, and this gentleman, Hirok Roy, he's a very senior Rotarian, and the question relates to whatever you said just now. Now, he asks that His Holiness says, speak only when you can improve upon silence. Speak only when you can improve upon silence. His question is it true? And how to practice it? So,
Well,
Mr. Mehrotra.
I think it's quite simple, really, that, speak only when you have something to say that is of, substance and meaning. And, I think there is great sense in the old adage, silence is golden. And, sometimes we, many of us, suffer from, verbal diarrhea. And so, it tends to be, sort of constipation of the mind and diarrhea of words. And so we just keep speaking, even when we have nothing significant to say. And I think that's what His, Holiness is pointing to. And he's also, pointing to the extreme challenge and limitation of words. Especially when we are, trying to talk about the spiritual realm, because, how can I experience or talk about, say, enlightenment, whatever enlightenment is, and I'm certainly nowhere near there, or even different states of consciousness, when I can't even sort of communicate or share with you what Rasgulla tastes like unless you have tasted it. So, the words only communicate when there is a shared experience. Now, if I've lived in Calcutta and we all know what Rasgulla tastes like, and then we say it's sweet and we try and explain its characteristics. But, I see some sort of, people from other parts of the world who are attending. How would you tell them what Rasgulla tastes like? I mean, you can never communicate that. And so we have to use words with, with precision and caution. There are different layers of communication. Look at His Holiness. I mean, he communicates by who he is, and not what he says. And you see in so many instances, people are in the Dalai Lama's presence, and because the power of his integrity and sincerity and his love is so deep that he doesn't say anything. People experience his grace and start weeping. And that means there is communication that's taking place at such profound levels. And equally, the contrary, that if, someone is, hostile and insensitive and uncaring, and he doesn't say anything, but you can experience that. So it's extremely important that we are very careful with words, because it gives concrete form and shape, and then we're stuck with it. And so I think that's what he's really saying, that don't start speaking unless you have something meaningful to say.
Right. Vedant Shah, he says that philosophy is very important, but he says that Stoicism is a part of philosophy. So he wants to know more about, how Stoicism, that's what he's asking.
Well, I have to say, I've also learned from His Holiness that when you don't know much about something, just admit you don't know. So I don't know a great deal about Stoicism, but I will say this, that as His Holiness says, that if Stoicism brings someone happiness and equanimity, and nurtures happiness and equanimity and compassion amongst those around him, who is to quarrel with any ism? So the point really is that, whatever is useful and meaningful to the individual and to the community. We're not here to say that, Buddhism is best or X is not so good. There's no judgment involved here.
The next question is from Rajiv Mehrotra, Mr. Mehrotra. He says, how and when will be the next of Dalai Lama be selected or nominated? What is the process? So how and when will this happen?
Well, when His Holiness is asked this question, He often jokes and he said, the people most concerned and worried about this are the Chinese. And, I haven't yet given it enough thought because, I'm healthy and well and I intend to live a long time. But having said that, traditionally, the Dalai Lama, the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama is, when great lamas move on to, we call them the heavenly fields, they leave some indication, either to their followers or to, mystical signs appear as to where, people might look. And they're subjected to very intense scrutiny. So what happens is that the community identifies, a number of, young boys who, and now His Holiness has said that it could be young girls too, who might be candidates. And then the candidates are tested very rigorously, intellectually, and asked questions and are shown objects that the previous Dalai Lamas had used and are identified as successors. But that's history. And I think that His Holiness has made, some things very clear. And in the spirit of his approach to who he is, he's given up the temporal, there was a 300-year tradition that the Dalai Lamas were the political and spiritual leaders of Tibet. He has abandoned, given up, surrendered the political leadership to an elected individual who's currently Lobsang Sangye, and he was been elected by the community in exile and said that in future Tibet, we now need political power to vest in an elected leader. So that political part has been put aside. So he remains the preeminent spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhism. And he is the Dalai Lama. It's the institution of the Dalai Lama, but it is organized by an individual, a human being, whose name is Tenzin Gyatso. And they have a principle, we have a principle in Tibetan Buddhism that called bodhicitta, of the bodhisattva. And it's very important to understand this when you look at the idea of reincarnation, which means that unlike in the Hindu tradition, where we seek moksha, which means we seek to break out of the cycle of birth and rebirth, and merge with Brahman, and so you're out of the cycle of suffering. But in Tibetan Buddhism, we seek to take birth voluntarily and in human form in order to teach and serve humanity and embrace the suffering of the human condition. So evolved lamas like His Holiness the Dalai Lama keep reincarnating in human form in order to teach and serve humanity. Now the Dalai Lama is an institution, but the monk, who is Tenzin Gyatso, has reaffirmed his commitment to taking rebirth, lifetime after lifetime, in order to teach and serve humanity. Now, whether it will be in the institution of the Dalai Lama or not will depend on the value of the institution. So if the institution is redundant, then there will be no need for him to be reborn. And that will be the end of the institution. And then in either case, apart from not being born in China, he said he will be born in a form and manner which will be most useful, including as a woman. So if it is most useful for a woman to be born and for a Dalai Lama or the next Tenzin Gyatso in his new human form to be a woman, he will take birth as a woman. And if it is as a monk or in whatever form and manner or profession, that will happen. Having said that, just in conclusion, this has to be unfortunately a long answer to a brief question, is that he has also suggested that he will consider breaking out of the tradition of reincarnated lamas, because in the time of the Buddha, the Buddhist Sangha, the leader of the Buddhist community after the Buddha himself was democratically elected. And he might suggest that depending on, again, he is nobody. He just says he's the preeminent monk. This must be democratically decided by the Buddhist community. And aside, largely because it's a Calcutta-based audience, to say that he has deep respect for Swami Vivekananda and Thakur, and that not widely known, but the Ramakrishna mission was evolved by Swami Vivekananda, who has said that the Buddha is my Ishta and Ramakrishna is my master on the basis of the structure of the Buddhist Sangha. Democratically elected, decentralized, and that is a possibility. But I think for a variety of reasons, the die has not yet been cast.
Thank you very much. You see, I think you almost answered this question. Mr. Gopinath, he says that how is Tibet doing without the physical presence of Dalai Lama?
Well, obviously not very well. There are two aspects here. That if we look at the geographical area that was Tibet, I think the Chinese have pumped in huge amounts of money in order to sort of try and improve living standards so that people forget the Dalai Lama and can be distracted from that tradition. So I'd have to say that materially, there will have been considerable change in Tibet. But in terms of the preservation of the authentic Tibetan civilization, that has been severely compromised. And His Holiness has often commented that Tibet's loss has been the world's gain. So that today Tibetan Buddhism has spread vastly across the world. And interestingly, that Pew Research, an organization that looks at these things in the United States, has observed that one of the fastest growing categories of religious traditions or spiritual traditions is a group that call themselves Friends of Tibetan Buddhism, which means that these are people who have not formally converted or embraced Tibetan Buddhism, but in the spirit of the Dalai Lama, that we should all learn what we can from different traditions by retaining our own. There are vast numbers of people who are engaged in the practices, techniques, and studies of, for want of a better word, rational, secular Buddhism. So its influence around the world is deeply growing. So in that sense, Tibetan Buddhism is doing quite well outside the land of its origins. But obviously it's a devastatingly sad situation that the home of that culture is threatening its very survival.
Suman Chakrabarti happens to be a film buff like me, Mr. Mehrotra, and he asks you, where can we watch your films? Are they available on OTT platforms?
Yes, they are. They are on YouTube, and there is a YouTube channel, and it's called. You just go put my name, put in YouTube channel, and you will find. Well, I have to admit that not all the films we made were we would want to own up to. But I'd say of the 600 odd films, at least 300-400 of them are there, and you're welcome to go in and watch, and they're all in the public domain, and they're available and accessible.
Mr. Mehrotra, we have Rotarians from Rotary Club of Tower Hamlet, London.
My goodness.
And yes, and the message that they have written, I'm sure they speak on all our behalf. They write, most interesting address and deeply moving. I think whatever they have written, they carry our sentiments. It has been a pleasure and a privilege listening to you, Mr. Mehrotra. And I think I speak on behalf of all of us. We are really, really enlightened. And please convey our good wishes, our prayers for peace, good health, and long life to His Holiness.
Mr.
And
Mitra, I will just interrupt you to say that I will tell His Holiness that, remember I told you about the mosquito in the beginning?
yes.
I will tell him the mosquito has stricken.
Okay, all right. May I now request Rotarian Amit Ghosh, Rotarian Amit Ghosh to kindly offer a formal vote of thanks.
I will just unmute Amit.
Yes. And of course, not to mention again, Renuka Shah, who did all the hard work to ensure that Mr. Mehrotra is amidst us.
Dear Mr. Rajiv Mehrotra, I think your talk has been very spellbound, and the audience has minutely, so to say, gobbled every word you said in introducing us what to learn from Dalai Lama. Top of the mind, a few words that I can remember: humility, happiness, sadhana, love and compassion as the universal religion, and embracing the logic of science. I think these will go a long way in our mind. And above all, you finished off saying that knowledge never decreases if shared. It was a beautiful half an hour discussion with you, and the way you solved all the questions and queries that many of us Rotarians had is really wonderful. And we admire you spending time with us today. On behalf of entire Rotary Club of Calcutta, my president, and all the dignitaries who have joined, including the PDGs from home and abroad, we give you a warm thank you in our typical Rotary mirror. Thank you, Mr. Rajiv Mehrotra.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Mehrotra, looking forward to listening to you, maybe sometimes, you see, in a physical mode, or you see, once the pandemic is over. But let me tell you, you have touched our hearts, you have touched our minds, and we are all enlightened. And as Mr. Ghosh has said, we are spellbound. That's it. Thank you very much. This week, you remember with good wishes, Rotary Club of Srinagar, India, RI District 3070. The meeting is adjourned at 7:05 p.m. Thank you very much for your kind presence, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, everyone. Merry Christmas in advance.